Uh, Before going into hiring or engineering, I'll give you a very simple example of data-driven decision making. Say there is an apple and there is a donut, and you ask people to say which one do you want to pick if you have a room of 10 people.
Mm,
Some people would say, I want to have an apple. Some people may say, I want to have a donut.
mm,
But the moment you try to set a North Star to say, I wanted you to be healthy and
mm,
lose calories,
mm.
then everybody would straight away unanimously pick an apple. Correct?
Welcome to another episode at Everyday Leadership. Our today's guest is Sudheer Bandaru, and in today's episodes, we'll try and understand what exactly is data-driven decision making and why is it important, and what are some biases and flaws often people have when they make decisions in the way they go about using data for a lot of these decisions. But before we sort of explore all of these things, let's start with a quick introduction of our guests. Sudhir, so why don't you sort of give us a quick introduction about you and help us understand how you got to where you are today?
Pleasure to be here, Pradeep. Thanks for having me here. Just to briefly introduce myself, I am Sudheer Bandaru. I'm the founder and CEO of Hivel.ai. I started my career as a software developer, worked at large companies, AT&T, HP, Merrill Lynch, everything in the Bay Area. Followed by that, I joined a startup called True Media, which went public. I've seen the journey from a garage level to the public IPO and went through multiple M&As as part of the process of going from the startup to IPO. It was a great journey, but after the company went public, I think I realized more of a startup person and joined another company called Shortlist. This was helping companies across India and Africa match talent with opportunities. One of the biggest lot of research what we have done is hiring is very, very biased. There is no data that really helps you to understand whom to hire and why to hire. More than 75-80% of the hiring happens in a very unstructured way and very, very biased. That whole thing helped us unlock so much of opportunities for people and how you can leverage data to make a right decision, predict your outcomes better. There are a lot of times people hire based on colleges or what the companies they're coming from. It's not that they're not good. It's just that you need to find the right fit. So the biases tell you somebody is from an Ivy League college is always going to be great, but may not be a perfect fit for the organization or the role that you're bringing in. So this whole data-driven decision making and kind of saying no to gut feel started from there. But then COVID happened, and everybody started to work remotely, and everybody were trying to understand what is engineering productivity. Is my team productive enough when they're all working from home? Should I call them back to office? Then the question stuck to me to say, what is productivity in the first place? How are you calling it as productive? Are you calling productive because they're available online until 9 p.m.? Are you calling productive because they're able to write a lot of lines of code? What is productivity, correct? So then you dig deeper, we realize that there is no objective way of measuring productivity, which means all of the decisions that engineering leaders today are taking are very, very data, not data driven. They're very gut based. There is lack of objectivity. So that is where I started Hivel and seen the need for data driven decision making in every organization for all their functions. We'll talk more about it, why engineering, why everything can be measured, why we can have data. But that's a long story of how I started as a software developer, being a CTO for over 10 plus years, and currently helping other engineering teams improve their productivity using Hivel.
No, I absolutely love this space. One of the reasons I've had a personal experience around this, how a lot of the engineering leaders approach productivity, right? So for them, a lot of them want to micromanage and make sure that the engineers are spending so many hours in the office. And for some, they would come up with some Jira tickets, and as long as they ensure the completeness of the Jira tickets, now that's productivity. But how is the engineer performing within that realm is something that's often missing. But let's sort of zoom step back a little bit and understand from your shortlist days. Let's talk about how data helped solving the hiring bias problem, and then we will go from there.
Good question. See, in emerging countries, you take India or Africa, the number of people who are unemployed is very, very high. At the same time, the number of people who have open roles is also very high, right? The jobs are sitting there for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. There is a matching problem. You're unable to match the talent with opportunities. The reason being, it's just gut-based decisions to say, hey, the filters are saying that, if you're from so-and-so college, if you're from so-and-so industry, that's what you kind of bring in, correct? So the moment we started to generate the data, we'd say, hey, doesn't matter whatever the background you come from, we give you a case exercise and we see how you perform on the case exercise. Accordingly, we are going to match you to the open jobs. Without the data that we created, without an opportunity that we have given to the employees, right, potential prospects, we would never have hired thousands of people,
Hmm.
right? So that it unlocked so many surprises for us because we never thought somebody coming from metallurgical industry would be a great computer science engineer.
Hmm.
We never thought somebody coming from food background would definitely be a good electronics engineer or operations person, correct? So there are so many variations on how it happened, and definitely we have seen the CEOs of Google and Microsoft, the backgrounds they have come from, and like know how they are leading some of the largest tech giants.
Hmm.
But can small companies take that level of risk and hire people irrespective of their backgrounds? Right? So that is where we understood that there are two parts to this. One is a bias, the inherent biases that we bring in. The second one is if you don't have enough data to kind of make a decision, create the data that would allow you to make a more informed choice.
Right. So in this particular example, so you give these candidates a test assignment, and then you would collect data as part of that, which you would then help all the decision makers leverage that to really understand what the potential of the candidate is. Now, I'm a bit curious about that. Like, how do you do that? Like, if you give somebody an assignment, they could be copying code from somewhere else and then just pasting it and then doing all kinds of things. How would you get meaningful data from that exercise?
Again, just to be clear, we are talking about a variety of roles, not
Mm,
engineering
mm,
specifically.
mm,
And a lot of these things, they have a situation-based
mm,
roles. So
mm,
these situation-based, there is nothing to copy, correct?
mm,
There is no
mm,
right answer in
mm,
cases. What
mm,
we're trying to assess is you're trying to understand, does this guy understand the role? What is a
mm,
personality style? And
mm,
along with these situation-based assessments, we also do psychometrics and we
mm,
combine personality style. It's more of a trying to find a fit for the role.
mm.
Correct. So it is situation based, which you cannot just copy from somewhere and paste it and say this is what it's going to be.
Yeah. No, hiring is so critical, and getting right people on board is so important. In fact, I was recently reading this book called Build to Great, and they have this whole chapter dedicated about really bringing in the right people and then asking, what to do with them. Uh, but I completely get it. I have a personal experience when I tried hiring in India. I would get hundreds and hundreds of applications, and the amount of work that I have to do just to filter through all of them is just a lot. But yeah, I'm sure that would have tremendously helped. But
I'll
now,
give one
yeah.
example here.
Mm,
At Hivel, one of our first employee is a lawyer,
mm,
and we didn't hire her to practice law
mm,
at Hivel, but to help us with customer success. And when we gave her the case exercise, she really outperformed all of
mm,
those people who had prior customer success experience.
mm,
And she has been one of our high performing star so far today.
mm,
And we have taken this kind of risk in so many examples. But
mm,
bringing a lawyer to do a customer success, the
mm,
only reason why it works is because one, their analytical skills are high,
mm,
their cognitive skills are high, their
mm,
communication is very good because
mm,
they understand, they listen, they
mm,
communicate.
mm,
Those are the skills that you really need for a customer success role.
absolutely.
You're able
Mm,
to bring the raw skills together. You
mm,
can put them in any kind of
mm,
roles that matches their core strength.
completely agreed. Um, this is good. Let's just talk about, let's define what is data-driven decision making, and then we'll sort of understand how to approach it. And then let's just start there.
Yeah. Uh, Before going into hiring or engineering, I'll give you a very simple example of data-driven decision making.
Mhm.
Say there is an apple and there is a donut, and you ask people to say which one do you want to pick if you have a room of 10 people.
Mm,
Some people would say, I want to have an apple. Some people may say, I want to have a donut.
mhm,
But the moment you try to set a North Star to say, I wanted you to be healthy and
mm,
lose calories,
mm,
then everybody would straight away unanimously pick an apple,
mm,
correct?
mhm,
Because there is a data that is associated with a donut that it has high calories,
mm,
that an apple has less calories.
mm,
And then two, you also have a data-driven goal of losing calories.
mm,
Now, the data-driven decision making is a very informed choice, non-subjective,
mm,
allowing the whole 10-member team to row the boat in the same direction.
mm,
This is a very simple example of how companies can make data-driven decision making
mm,
without going back into who is going to win, whose decision becomes the final, and all of those things.
mm,
Even if you take Google, for example, there is no single person at Google who would decide the colors that goes on the website.
mm,
The hyperlink we see on the Google,
mm,
it's a lot of A/B testing that is done to say which
mm,
color has to be chosen for the visited link on Google.
mm, mm,
They have tried with probably 40 to 50 variations of blue,
mm,
kind of align on this current one.
mm,
That is data-driven decision making. When you say that, hey, I don't trust you, I don't trust myself, but let the
mm,
data help us understand what color of blue should be used for this.
mm,
Large companies rely heavily on data. There is no gut decisions happening there
mm,
because the scale is huge. The
mm,
value is huge.
mm. Absolutely. So if I were to really summarize the Apple donut example, so the decision making is, what are you trying to achieve from this decision making? What is the goal of this decision? At the same time, do you have enough data that is sort of somehow related with the goal, right? So, Apple can have a lot of vitamins and this and that, but all of that is not needed. In this particular case, you're trying to reduce calories. So how much calories does Apple have? And having data that's very corresponding to the goal that you're trying to achieve. So it's about having that data that we need to make the decisions. Is that a simple framework that we can apply in anywhere, any place?
Absolutely, right? You take the example of sales.
Mm-hmm.
People start with, I wanted to hit $1 million quota.
Mm-hmm.
The sales AE role are designed by your quota.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, reverse engineer to say how many leads I need to bring in, how many deals I need to close, what should be the ACV for me to hit the $1 million quota.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with customer success. You wanted to
Mm-hmm.
make sure you got a 5 star. You want to make sure your product feature NPS is so high,
Mm-hmm.
correct? Same thing with marketing. You want a $10 million pipeline, you need to generate these many meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is very data driven to say when you have a North Star goal, which is a objective value,
Mm-hmm.
and your actions will lead you to there.
Mm-hmm. Or is there a more of a bottom-up sort of approach here? So you have plenty of data. Let's say if there is a company that's selling to millions of customers and of different personality types and different usability metrics and whatnot. There's a ton of data, and hey, you have this data that in your hands. So can you generate insights from this data? Will that approach ever work?
Uh, Sorry about that. There is definitely ton of data, but there are two things that we need to consider when taking data for decision making. One is output versus outcome.
Mm,
Output data is trying to say what actions have been done.
mm,
It's like you're monitoring the engineering efficiency by like how we started the conversation to say how many hours somebody sits in the office,
mm,
how many lines of code somebody writes
mm,
is output. Nobody
mm,
cares about it.
mm,
It's like giving somebody telling somebody, pedal faster and giving them a stationary bike in the gym.
mm,
They keep on pedaling, but they don't go anywhere.
mm,
Outcome metrics are more about, I wanted you to reach the destination.
mm,
It's not about how fast you kind of pedal, but how
mm,
fast you cycle, but you wanted to reach a destination, right? There is a very huge difference between output versus outcome metrics.
mm,
So we need to pick the outcome metrics. That is number one.
mm,
Second, we need to pick very few metrics as much as possible. And when you pick outcome, the metrics will be very less.
mm,
Today, people have a lot of data, but one, they do not have the actual metrics to be measured.
mm,
Having data is very different, and having metrics is very different. Having metrics is very different than your outcome metrics, and how you kind of map them to your final North Star goal is very, very different, right? So
mm,
it is a lot of science and research to understand what is your outcome and what will actually get you there. Monitoring somebody is saying, like, how many calls somebody is making doesn't help you. How many meetings somebody is booking matters.
mm.
Correct?
Awesome. Yeah, I completely understand. So not many people really look at, the difference between having a lot of data points and having the real metrics that sort of make sense in the end. And we see that like with all the analytics in the software world, we log everything that we see. Everything under the sun goes into some database somewhere, but and then we try to leverage all of that and end up not making anything valuable out of it. But it looks like is there anything that you can talk about? How do we define metrics, and is there a standard approach to defining metrics, or does it also depend on the end goal that you're trying to achieve, and that sort of defines what are the metrics that you should go for, and someone else will curate those metrics so you can leverage them?
Most functions have industry standard metrics to begin with, right?
Hmm,
Like if you take a company, a public company, you have a stock price, definitely. If you're a private company, you have like revenue,
hmm,
fundraising. Fundraising cannot be a standard metric. I'm like, it's a very vanity metric in many ways, right? It can be
hmm,
subject, many factors come in, but your revenue is a great metric. You can have like, burn ratio, effectiveness ratio. What is the R&D percentage you spend on the revenue percentage? What is your sales and marketing spend percentage, right? All
hmm,
of these are a good way. You cannot keep hiring more people. You can have like today, most companies are moving from growth at any cost to growth efficiently and profitability, correct?
hmm,
And if you are trying to say that if you want achieve profitability, you wanted to make sure your R&D percentage spend is like 25% of your revenue, for example. The moment you bring this in, you try to bring in efficiency,
hmm,
correct? It's very
hmm,
easy because this is very black and white, how much you're paying your engineers. It's very
hmm,
black and white. What is your revenue?
hmm,
And if my industry standard says that R&D spend should be 25%, now I can benchmark it,
hmm,
correct?
hmm,
So one is like having the data on both the sides about
hmm,
what you're trying to achieve. But two, you also wanted to benchmark to know if this is the right metric.
hmm,
So choosing metrics, I would strongly encourage going with industry standard metrics.
hmm,
And then that would allow you to benchmark, but build a lot of internal leading indicators that would help you to understand are you going to get there or not.
hmm,
For example, you cannot say, I wanted to just see the 25% spend of R&D for my based on my revenue, but you also wanted to see how can I improve the efficiency of the engineering team to make sure, I'm delivering the business outcomes.
hmm,
My engineering team is working on the right priorities, those
hmm.
sorts of things, right? So there are leading indicators and there are the industry benchmarking metrics.
Awesome. And do you have any stories to tell where, where you help someone make better decisions? It could be from your, previous companies or at Hivel or from some of your existing customers. So if you have any good stories to share and sort of give us a bit of a deep dive into, how you approached and what kind of problems were solved, I think that would be very interesting stories to understand for a lot of the listeners.
Definitely. I have a lot of stories. For some of them, I have permission to share. Some of them I cannot. But I'll share you one interesting story by a logistic unicorn in India.
Mhm.
They have a large engineering team and they deliver millions of packets every month to the doorsteps.
Mm,
And for them, quality is very, very important. They have
mm,
invested a lot in monitoring, instrumentation, everything. But they continue to see some production issues, like the nature of software. Correct. The VP of engineering, when they started to see Hivel, they said, "Oh my God, I can see everything what's happening in my team, and understand why the quality is working versus not working." So the moment you saw the actual indicators which are contributing to the production issues,
mm,
he started to say, "We just need to slow down." So just to kind of go slightly technical, right?
mm,
They realized that they had a production issues happening. And when we did a deep dive into the data, we realized people were not reviewing the pull requests.
mm,
The reason they were not reviewing the pull requests because they were planning for 100% of the capacity of the team, and 20% bugs started to come on top of the 100% bugs
mm,
capacity of roadmap.
mm,
So every sprint, the team was at 120% capacity.
mm,
When you have 120% capacity, obviously, even I, as a software engineer, would try to cut corners and not do the review process for the pull requests.
mm,
When this happens, you kind of get into a cycle where, people are burning out, production issues are coming, roadmap is not delivering.
mm,
This VP engineering, he said, I'm like, no, we partnered with them to say, this is how we want to do it. We need to slow down.
mm,
Historically, we see there is like 20% of the bugs coming in every sprint. So one, we
mm,
need to plan for 80% so that the other 20%, we don't know what it is, but we are going to go that we are going to be full. Correct?
mm, mm,
That is one. Step two, instead of taking 80% capacity, we are going to give them time to review every pull request in the best practice format and see what
mm,
can they act.
mm,
When we started to do the review process, over a period of 6 months, the production issues have gone down by 22%.
mm,
Now they understood, okay, to maintain this quality, this is the pace with which we can go.
mm,
So in a similar way, they have slowed down to improve the quality.
mm,
It's a very common sense people to say, hey, slow down and improve the quality, but you're
mm,
not going to get stakeholder buy-in if you don't show the data that you're slowing down to really improve the quality.
mm,
Because it is a long-term game, right? 3 months, 6 months.
mm,
Because if you start reviewing your code today, you're not going to see the production issues going away tomorrow.
mm.
Because the production issues you're getting today are something that was created 6 months back.
Yeah.
So we created a case study on this, and there are so many other case studies. Of like, recently a GitHub, one of our client was using GitHub Copilot, and they
Mm,
said, everybody claims I'm like, they are improving speed. I'm like, how do I know that? Should I believe
mm,
it or can I see it?
mm,
Right? We pulled up the data and they said, tell us what's happening here. And
mm,
we said, you're slowing down.
mm,
They were
mm,
slowing down after using GitHub
mm,
Copilot. The
mm,
reason is the developers were actually able to code faster, like the claims happen, but the code review was slowing down. The reason is junior developers were taking all the suggestions from GitHub Copilot, kind of putting it in there. And definitely it was the burden was shifted to the reviewers so
mm,
that, they made sure I need to know what this guy wrote. I need
mm,
to know that this is relevant to our business. I need to know we can maintain this code later, right?
mm,
And the review process completely slowed down.
mm,
Overall, the cycle time is what we call the speed of releases has slowed down.
mm,
Then we kind of worked with them to understand how do we train the developers on what to accept the suggestions, what not to from Copilot. How
mm.
can we streamline the code review process? And eventually we increase the speed of the deliveries.
I see. And in the first case, when you mentioned that you made the team slow down, you not only slowed down at the same time produced equally as much as you were doing before, but it also has the team is not burned down anymore. And I think that is very interesting. But is Hivel as a company very tailor made for software teams, or they could be, any team, and then you would plug in a lot of the metrics and you would come out with some interesting decisions for whoever it is.
It is mainly for software teams. We have chosen
Mm,
that as a vertical function because
mm,
other functions already have metrics. Engineering is software engineering is the one that doesn't have. They do have a lot of data. They
mm,
don't have clear metrics and
mm.
outcome metrics, and kind of connecting the dots across these data points to kind of form a story. Right, that is lacking today.
Nice,
And I come
nice.
from a CTO background. That's what led me to start in this.
No, I can imagine. I mean, especially when you're managing a team, you have to be very mindful of how you assign the capacity, and how do you ensure the code is reviewed, and those things really matter. Um, but one other question that I have is, when you're trying to pull, is more data good or is less data good, especially when you're trying to make decisions?
You should have the sample size should be more, to
Hmm,
be clear. The metrics that you measure should be less.
that is interesting. So, and and how do I know how much data is enough? Like, let's say I'm trying to draw some conclusions from some sales, like, but how do I know is 100 sales is an enough data to conclude that, hey, this is what it is, and change the direction? And I'll tell you with an interesting example. So there was a time during my first company, we were trying to really build a marketplace for high school and college students. And then the way we were acquiring users was using Instagram ads at the time. And then it was very easy to acquire college students because they were getting paid for the time that they were spending on app. But it was very difficult to hire the high school students. So we started buying ads, and then we've acquired about 10,000 users, and then we have a bunch of data that we gathered. And then we were looking at it. Obviously, we saw some problems. But then the question that we've had at the time was, is this data enough to conclude that this business is not working, or should we spend more time trying to change the app, burn more money acquiring the users? And when is the right time to say that, I have enough data, and then I can make decisions and move on?
There is uh, qualitative data and there is quantitative data, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So when you have 10,000 users, the question there is probably it's a good sample size. The question there is the metrics that you're using there, are they coming only for the first time? Are they coming second time and third time? If it is a first time, are they motivated by any promotions or excitement? If they're not coming for the second time, was there a promise we made we are not able to keep up the promise for them to be returning? Or is there no recurring value for the user to come back next? Right? So those metrics and a combination of qualitative analysis would help in general. Where I would say data sample size is good versus not good is one, there should be seasonality. When you say, like, maybe summer holidays could be very different, winter holidays is different, school starts is very different in your example, right? There is so much of seasonality. Did you see the seasonality in the first place? What are the spikes in the load depending on the holidays versus working days or school days, correct? Then the second one is more about when you kind of do an A/B test, or if you haven't done A/B test, were you able to get a good cohort of people in every cohort? I'm like, did you get like 20% of the people in every cohort? If there was a cohort that you're trying to say that, people are not returning and the cohort is too small, if the high school students were too small, like under 10%, then that is not a good sample size, right? So there are so many factors that play a role. I would say that if you're unable to draw a good conclusion, probably that is not a good data size. Or if you haven't tracked the right metrics to kind of or collected enough data to kind of create your metrics there.
Yeah. And one thing I noticed from this conversation is, I think a lot of the good decisions are the result of having a lot of clarity in terms of what you want to achieve. And at the same time, if I want to really go back and experiment, like you mentioned, so there is a ton of branching that I can do. And Is the message good or not? And then, testing the message. And if the
Yeah.
message is good, pick the winning message. And then with this message, maybe acquire. So if you start early and then if we start branching out, after careful experimentation, I think looks like a good way of approaching it than acquiring 10,000 users and then trying to see at what level, we can branch out and could have tried this and whatnot. But,
That
my
is where
point
the
is,
A/B testing world comes in, right? I'm like, the
mm,
A/B testing will work. And
mm,
where you find out all the myth busters are when you do multivariate testing. I
mm,
spent like 5, 7 years where we
mm,
changed the color of a button and, improved in 0.5% or 1% of
mm,
conversions on a
mm,
very large scale, multi-million dollar scale.
mm,
And just the color of the button changes a lot.
mm,
But the message, text color, and a
mm,
combination of the button color
mm,
may not work. Both
mm,
of them may work individually, but when you kind of mix them up, they may not
mm.
work. So
Agree.
there is a lot of investments that are happening over the A/B testing, multivariate testing to kind of really understand what really works.
I see. And from your journey, startup journey, were there any decisions that you made which contributed positively, especially when you're trying to go from 0 to 1 with Hivel or your previous companies?
Sorry.
Are there any decisions that you made during your journey with Hivel, especially when you're turning it from 0 to 1, as you're navigating your early clients or trying to get some traction? Were there any such decisions that you made which sort of helped? Uh,
Yes, yes. So when we were part of the research, when we were doing a discovery, understanding, hey, how important is data-driven decision making for you as an engineering leader?
hmm,
Pretty much everybody said, yes, this is very important.
hmm,
And we thought, oh, this is great. I'm like, everybody wants this solution, right? There is a big problem. But then the moment we started to kind of put the data, we started working with customers, we realized that uh, having pain is different and having an intensity of pain is different.
hmm,
And that only we realized that when we started to see some smaller customers with 20 engineers and 30 engineers, they were starting to churn.
hmm,
We realized, I'm like, why is there a churn? And because we had a good segmentation of data about who are what is the engineering size and how our cohorts are there, we were
hmm,
able to say that there was a pattern that said, like, companies with under 50, 60 engineers, they have the pain, but it is not the top one, two, or three on the list.
hmm, hmm,
The intensity of pain is not so much because they are working towards so many different things. Analytics and visibility is not their efficiency is not their problem.
hmm,
And then when we started to see that, our whole marketing, outbound, outreach, everything has changed because we realized who our ICP is based on the data.
hmm,
Now you go to every engineering leader and you say it's pain, but you also ask, like, what is the intensity of the pain? What do you lose if you don't have a product like Hivel?
hmm,
Then, oh my God, I don't know what's happening. I don't know why I have to hire more people. I don't know why I cannot deliver my features on time. I don't know what should I report to the board. These are
hmm.
the bigger pain points,
Nice. Very
right?
interesting.
So our whole outbound marketing has changed when we realized our ICP. Again, it
Hmm,
was not enough research. Probably in hindsight, we could have probably, did that cohort based understanding who are all these people, or like probably asked additional questions.
hmm.
But we realized it way sooner in the process, I'd say.
Nice. And especially now that, if let's say if you came across this customer, prospective customer, whom this is not as big as a pain point, but more like a nice to have, would you change your approach, or did you draw any conclusions in terms of, now, from all the research you've done, who your customer is, but then did you also learn anything about who is that other cohort of customers that have this pain point, but not something must have, like, it's nice
Yeah,
to have.
absolutely right. Fortunately, ours is a lot of a self-serve product, and it is
Hmm,
very agnostic by the team size or geo.
hmm,
So while we focus a lot on the US market and India markets, we do get customers from Middle East. We do get customers with 30 engineers. We wouldn't say
hmm,
no to them,
hmm,
but we would not do the outreach to them. Our outbound is always, because inbound you cannot control, correct?
hmm, hmm,
Hey, Pradeep comes and he referred somebody, I cannot say no because
mm,
there's a product you can come and sign up, pay us, use it.
mm, mm,
So that's not going to stop. But your outbound dollars are
mm,
very, very focused now,
mm. Awesome.
right?
Yeah. So, let me switch the gear a little bit. And I have a couple of questions, obviously, to benefit a lot of those first time founders. And it looks like this is the first time you're playing in the enterprise space, is it? The
Yes,
the
you can
true
say
media
so.
was, yeah. So uh,
Sorry?
the previous two companies, I don't think they were exactly in the enterprise space per se. Is it?
Yes, the first one we were working with large enterprises. You say when working with large enterprises, yes, I was
Well,
working with large enterprises before, but this is a very different kind of game altogether.
nice. But how did you learn enterprise sales? Like, are there any things when you look back? What are some learnings that you can, give us in terms of approaching enterprise customers?
Enterprise customers, yeah, so many learnings. Definitely, while I worked with some of the large insurance and large fintech companies in the past, uh, where I was in my previous roles, the game is very, very different by, first of all, understanding who you are selling to in the enterprise.
Mm,
The first learning is enterprises are nothing but it's not a object. They are a bunch of people, right? You have to look at enterprises versus mid market as a bunch of people.
mm,
That's the step one. Step two is people have pain points, and you need to understand what are those pains.
mm,
Even if you're mid market or an enterprise, as an enterprise sales in particular, we need to understand the product champion internally.
mm,
Identifying the product champion is the biggest problem. For those kind of companies, budget is never the problem.
mm,
They have the money to experiment. They have the money to be forward looking. They have the uh, what we would say they can be the early adopters, right? As long as security and those things are addressed. So having a product champion is very, very important internally. And second is like, how much of the influencers, right? I'm like, how many of the influencers can you kind of convince about your product or sales?
mm,
Having a product champion alone is not going to be sufficient. You need to have some internal influencers. So you should be, your product should be helping multiple people there. And
mm,
you should be in touch with multiple people who are part of the decision making process, not the directly decision, but also the indirectly decision making process. In our example, we go to the CTO. CTO is super impressed with the product. He says, I definitely like this. I want this. Then he says, let my team take a look at it. And, he brings in their VPs of engineering or directors of engineering. And, we need to make sure we are adding value to them because they
mm,
are collectively making a decision. At enterprises, the single person is not making a decision. It's
mm,
going to be a collective decision coming from multiple people. So that is one. And then finally, enterprises, until the contract is signed, nothing is done. And the time you think that you're going to close something in the quarter one, Q1,
mm,
you
mm,
should be very, very understanding. I'm like, it doesn't happen in Q1 the way you think. With
mm,
enterprises, there are so many conflicting priorities. What is top of the list may not be top of the list in next quarter or next month. So your priority keeps changing every month.
mm.
So kind of it's like herding the cats in an enterprise sale
Mm,
to get things done.
mm,
So it's very important, and yeah, so many learnings. But to keep it very few, I would say identify your product champions and influencers.
mm.
Make sure you're delivering the value to both the influencers and champions, and have a proper expectations of when the deal is going to close,
I
depending
see.
on their changing priorities.
I see. So one another follow-up question. So did you have to change the architecture of the product for a specific enterprise needs? Because I'm sure a lot of the data security questions and all kinds of questions would come your way. So you said that your product is very easy to integrate and it doesn't matter how many users, there are and whatnot. But did you have to change with enterprise anything in your product?
Yes, enterprises come with their own set of internal processes. They don't want to have a product that would bring in demand a lot of change management internally. Step
Mm,
one,
mm,
right? So they will say, "Hey, I understand this is a best practice, but I cannot change the whole team today. 800 engineers, 1,000 engineers today." correct?
mm, mm,
So the product needs to be able to adapt to their internal processes while sharing them with them what are the best practices and what are the benchmarks, correct?
mm, mm,
We have made some customizations to large enterprises, and that is a basic expectation of any enterprise these days, correct?
mm,
So now what we have learned in the last couple of years serving some of the large enterprises, is we are bringing this control and flexibility into the product
mm,
so that these controls and flexibility can be configured and can be made yours.
mm,
So that is something that we are launching as we speak, end of this year, where
mm,
you will have a lot of flexibility to make these customizations.
mm,
That way, you're trying to understand what are your internal processes in a very configurable way. At the
mm.
same time, understanding, following this process, this is the value of my metric today. This is where I stand today.
I see. That's a very important lesson for a lot of the founders, aspiring enterprise customers. And is there any standard way of giving control to the enterprises, be it the data controls or privacy controls and all that? Is there a standard set of way of doing it, or is it very something that you have to learn on the
It is
go?
something you have to learn. Again, like I said, we are learning from our customers about what areas they need flexibility and control. We are building it right now.
Mm,
The first, if I have to tell any founder, don't try to bring in control and flexibility on day one. There is
mm,
a MPP, the minimum viability of the product is what you are trying to validate in the beginning.
mm.
It doesn't matter how much of hard coding and if else conditions you write in the code, nobody's going to care about it in the beginning,
Yeah,
right? So
that's mhm,
go with the hacky solution to begin with. Do
mm,
any level of customization that's not going to scale. That's okay. Do
mm,
things that don't scale, like the famous people said.
mm.
And once you find out this is a recurring problem, then you kind of go build those things in the architecture and the product to make these customizations.
Understood. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And at Hivel, so how do you bring focus among your team? Like, how do you ensure that your team is rowing in the same direction?
We drink our own champagne in the first place. And when we say drink our own champagne, not just for the engineering, but productivity is something that matters
Mm,
a lot for all of our functions, customer success or marketing or sales.
mm,
Correct. So we don't follow a very rigorous OKR process, but we all have a North Star metrics for each function.
mm,
And we're very, very result oriented. We tell them
mm,
like, no, we don't care about how many hours you sit in the office, how many days you show up in the office.
mm,
Um, and very interestingly, we're also not a kind of company who would be working 16 hours a day as a startup.
mm,
Because where we have seen the productivity gains is not when people have worked for 16 hours, but when people have a consistent, sustainable way of working.
mm,
Uh, Interestingly, end of the year, the 23rd to 1st, we are
mm,
all going to be shutting down the company and taking a full break,
mm,
a startup. The reason is holiday should not end with your childhood.
mm,
Two, while people can still take their holidays when they wanted,
mm,
there is always the work that mounts up when you're back to work.
mm,
And we don't want that to happen. It's not a real break, right? People are checking their emails even though you're on holiday. So we are taking a full holiday. So we
mm,
focus on a couple of things. One, a great well-being of the employees.
mm,
We give them clear goals on what to achieve and give
mm,
them the autonomy to achieve them. We tell them what to achieve, we let them figure out how to achieve them. These
mm,
are the two things that have helped us really gain a lot of traction, good
mm,
results with a very lean team.
mm,
If you see any of the industry benchmarking, we've been in the top 1%, 2% in terms of efficiency globally,
mm,
in
mm.
terms of our startup, because these are the simple rules we follow about prioritizing North Star goals and well-being of employees.
Nice. And do you have 1 year goals, or you have quarterly goals or a monthly goals? I mean, you're a startup, so I'm kind of curious. So you built a tool to really optimize for the productivity and whatnot. But on the other side, so there is another thing where you're treading or where you're letting the team row towards bigger goals as well. So I wonder, do you have yearly or quarterly? What kind of goal setting do you have now?
Um, we am like, we think of it like this, right? We say
Mm,
outcome backwards. So
mm,
which means like you say you wanted an outcome of X things to happen or X million to happen 1 year
mm,
from now. You
mm,
kind of look backwards and break it down to say you're not going to do 250K per quarter. You're
mm,
going to do 150K in the first quarter, 250K in the next quarter, probably 350K in the next quarter, and then even less in Q4 because it's going to
Mm,
be holiday season and all. So you
mm,
have to take a lot of these things into account when you're kind of saying the first quarter is going to be less because you're kind of finding out your way into the market and stuff. Second
mm,
quarter, you get some efficiencies. Third quarter, you probably realized and you added more people and more dollars to your marketing. So
mm,
all of these things consideration, and then you have a Q4 is a holiday time, Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year and stuff. So things will slow down.
mm.
So this is how we look at a year and then kind of go back and break it down by quarterly level.
I see. Awesome. Well, I think I think we sort of covered a lot of the ground here in terms of the decision making, which is probably the most critical thing that one needs to get right to go everything smoothly. Can you also talk a bit about Hivel and talk about how, if somebody wants to adopt Hivel, uh, what do they have to do? How easy it is to just deploy Hivel in their setup?
Yeah, great. First of all, Hivel is trying to solve this exact problem of throwing some light on this black box of engineering as a function, right?
Mm,
Engineering leaders should not be flying blind, and likewise, the founders and CEOs should not be flying blind about what's happening in their engineering organization.
mm,
So what we do is we get the data from tools that developers already use, like
mm,
your GitHubs of the world, Jira, SonarQube, static code analysis tools, like all the CI/CD, everything, and then turn them into dashboards, but with very meaningful, predefined industry research-backed metrics.
mm,
These metrics, having the leading indicators of these metrics, telling why this is happening and what you can do about it. These are the actionable insights we provide.
mm,
One is a diagnostic approach to say why it happened.
mm,
Two is to say what you can do about fixing it.
mm,
And this is how we are able to navigate the engineering organizations from where they are today to where they want it to be tomorrow
mm,
in a very guided, navigated path, right? It's like we set the goal, destination, but also we are like your Google Maps to success for
mm,
engineering organization. Once we do this, people can come to the platform, they can sign up. We pull
mm,
your last historical 60 days of data so that you're
mm,
not starting on a blank slate and you start to see the value immediately out of the box.
mm,
We provide you two types of insights.
mm,
One side of insights, what we see is, yes, I knew this was happening. I
mm,
just have the data to prove it.
mm,
Oh my God, I never knew this was happening. This is interesting. Let me double click to make sure this is right. And this is where people have these kind of aha moments and insights when they see the data. And then the rest follows where we kind of take them through a quarterly, setting a quarterly goals and allowing them to achieve their actual engineering efficiency over a period of 1 year and stuff. The setup is very straightforward. Usually it takes like 1 hour of effort from the client side,
mm,
and the data is up and running in 24 hours. And we provide them with a lot of customer success. We believe a
mm,
lot of a hand holding in the process to educate the market. We are a new category in still in many ways.
mm,
It's not that everybody is familiar with engineering function when it comes to metrics and data-driven decision making, because we
mm,
all have developed enough gut decisions to kind of live. It's a status quo has been very relying on gut decisions.
mm.
So we educate the leaders, we educate our clients about why this metric and how you can use this metric and how you can improve. And yeah, we are super delighted about the traction that we've been getting. Some of our customers have been doing town halls. Some of our customers have been pulling some of these metrics as part of their board decks. Some of the customers are like putting it as part of their core workflow. So it really gives so much of delight to see how the overall engineering community has been adopting these metrics and this culture of transparency and accountability.
Awesome. I can see a great use with a tool like this. Someone can have this at their tips to understand where the hotspots are in execution. Thank you so much for your time, Sudhir, today, and really appreciate you giving us this time and talking about, some examples of data-driven decision making. Also giving us a tour of, how should one approach enterprise sales, and lots of other insights as well. So really appreciate your time and thank you for spending your valuable time here on this show.
Thank you so much, Pradeep, for giving me this opportunity. I'm sure hope it'll help the listeners.